You made it to level 2, deeper questions leading to deeper answers. I'm Tomas Garza, and I'm here to help you decide to transform. I'll be setting the pace for the process to support your unfolding. Learn and commit to a practice that brings simplicity and an awareness of what is ready to be released. Join me now and allow the experience of a deeper sense of love. Hello and welcome to Decide to Transform. I'm your host, Tomas Garza, and we have a very special, very high energy, and very impactful guest interview in store for you today. Joining me all the way from New Zealand is Dr. Stephan Neff. Now, Stephan and I are co-authors of the book that's been recently published, Breakdown to Wake Up. I should say we're not the only two co-authors. We're joined by 14 of our other esteemed colleagues from all over the world. Now, the book, the compilation Breakdown to Wake Up, is a very hard-hitting read full of people's life transformational stories. I had the pleasure to be interviewed on Stephan's podcast, A Different Life Story, which aired very recently here. Now, we'll be talking a little bit about podcasting and the podcast journey, but Stephan is an anesthetist, an author, and an alcoholic in recovery. After studying medicine in Heidelberg, Germany, he traveled and worked in Europe and Australia before settling down with his family in beautiful New Zealand. As a retired pain physician, he developed a specific insight into human psychology. As a man trying to drown his sorrows, he found out the hard way that the critters can swim. But over the last 7 years, he made every day a little bit better than yesterday. Now, today, Stephan is an expert in living life so fantastically that alcohol has simply no role at all to play. He shares this passion through his podcast, his YouTube channel, and other social media, all titled A Different Life Story. In his book, My Steps to Sobriety, he shares the lessons he has learned as a doctor and as a man. And the truth is simple: the past does not equal the future. Every alcoholic can turn his or her life around one decision at a time. And his book shows how to do it. So too does his podcast and this chapter in Breakdown to Wake Up, which is wonderful. Stephan, welcome to the show here.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It is an honor. Thank you very much, Tomas.
It's a pleasure to have you. And I had such a good time and such an in-depth conversation with you on your show a few weeks ago that I'm very excited that you've joined me here. Now, we talked in the intro about Breakdown to Wake Up, which has been recently published. And every single person that has contributed a chapter has been highly vulnerable and exposed themselves to the nth degree, really, in many cases. And what I wanted to do is just lead off with the writing process of your chapter in this book, Breakdown to Wake Up. So for the listener, how did you experience this? What was this like for you to write?
It's a very good question, because as everything, it is an absolute roller coaster of emotions. Mm-hmm. And talk about the scariest roller coaster you can find. That's nothing in comparison to writing about the past where you were full of guilt and shame, where essentially all the negative emotions were driving you to do the things that you did. In my case, really drown my sorrows with alcohol. And therefore, even if you think you got your ducks in a row, and even if you think that you have actually put things to bed, you haven't. You dealt with some of the things, but things come back out again. And it's amazing. when you go into depth again into your own history, how suddenly your mind focuses on another little vignette and another little story that you actually had forgotten about, and suddenly it comes back up. And like the me driving to the rehab hospital with my family in the car. I was sitting in the passenger seat, and I had been driving forever as part of my job. I mean, driving 10,000s of miles a year, but always in the driver's seat. And now to be in a passenger seat, and this was a metaphor which was actually so true, because I was no longer in control. I was not in control of my life. I was not in control of the car at this moment in time. I was not in control of my future, because my wife had, behind my back, admitted me to the rehab hospital. And we were on the journey there. And it is that particular thing had suddenly such a meaning for me. So whenever you address a painful period in your life, it is amazing what transformation happens by just writing things down, by just going through them again. So I found writing my initial book, My Steps to Sobriety, as incredibly cathartic, I guess, cleansing, painful, but also beautiful. And I knew I did it for the single most important reason. If I had gone through so much pain, let's actually make that meaningful. If I've just had all this pain and then I dealt with it somehow and that's it, well, that doesn't make sense to me. And then when my wife one day said, like, why don't you write a book? I said, I'm not sure I put myself out there this much. And then I slept on it and started tentatively writing, and whoa, I couldn't stop. And it was brutal, because those 6 months when I initially wrote My Steps to Sobriety, wow, did I go through again every single steps of the 12 steps, and I discovered new things and new traumatic things that I thought I had dealt with, and suddenly they came back out, and I thought, wow, where are you coming from? I thought I had dealt with you. And so it was that journey up and down. And so whenever you do this kind of writing process, it brings out a lot of things, because suddenly you put your emotions into words and put the words onto paper. That's where the power of journaling is so great, because if you can actually write something down, suddenly it stares at you back and you think, okay. And suddenly there are these aha moments. So I had that when I initially wrote My Steps to Sobriety. And I had exactly the same thing again when I wrote my contribution to this beautiful book, that Breakdown to Wake Up. So it is a very interesting journey. It's not a pretty journey, because my life was not pretty. So therefore, me writing about it brought back up some of the old trauma that I had thought I had dealt with.
Yes. And I think that you speak for just about every author. You certainly speak for me when you say that the process of writing this chapter brought up stuff that I certainly thought personally I had dealt with. Now, for those listening, the book was published in November of 2020. So it's very recent. We're recording here in January of 2021. And this was a very recent thing. I wrote in my own chapter about an event that took place over a period of years well prior to 2020. So how far removed were you from the events of going to rehab and the writing of the chapter last year?
Well, day 2513 is today. So I'm as an alcoholic, we often count our sobriety days. And in all fairness, I can't count this far, so I've got a little app that tells me which day is that. But
There's
it
an app
is
for that. Perfect.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, but
Yeah.
I like it because it shows me that I had 2,513 chances to turn my life around, and that is just in days. If you look at it 10 times, what is it, 88,000 seconds? Because that's what a life is all about. It's a series of opportunities to make decisions, and each decision builds on top of each other.
Yeah.
So you can decide to get absolutely hammered, and then you can decide to have the hangover, and then you can decide to try to hide the alcohol, and then you can decide all that. These are all decisions, ultimately.
They are.
So, and I strongly believe in that nowadays. I believe in the principle of extreme ownership, and that you write the next chapter in your story. No one else forces you to do certain things. Now, okay, I give you that. Right now, these are strange times. If you're in quarantine and around this world, then yes, you are forced to be in quarantine, which brings its own trauma and its own insecurities and concerns. So there's certain things you can't do anything about, but there is a lot to be said about your choice how to deal with those life challenges. Yes, you can put your head in the sand, the proverbial ostrich, or you can actually say, whoa, this is very strange. I'm sitting at home. Instead of saying, oh my God, what boring, you could say, well, actually, what are the things that I have never done? What project do I want to do now?
Okay.
I mean, here in New Zealand, after 5 weeks of quarantine, there was not a single man's shed that was not completely restructured. There was not a single, men did a lot of, and I'm saying man here for the sake of it, a lot of people did exactly that. They used it as a chance to relook at their life. So instead of being something very, very bad, they took it as a challenge and rose from that. So there was a big transformation in many people that I spoke to after the 5 weeks of quarantine. So that is an example. You write the next chapter, and that is what I have learned to do.
I love this. And this fits in perfectly well with the title of your chapter, A Phoenix Must Also Burn. Did I get that right? Yes, I believe so. And with that is the rising and the fire of that, the pain of transformation. So I think that symbol is absolutely perfect. And that you do write the next chapter in your story. Now, quite clearly, on day 2,513, congratulations on that. First of all, that's wonderful. How many years actually is that?
Give or take 7.
7. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. That just I wasn't able to do that math
quickly.
Not in my
That's
head.
okay. That's okay. This is not a math test here,
No,
and
perfect.
there are no prizes for that.
I love that. Well, and I also love for those that are bogged down by counting that high that there's an app for it. I mean, there really literally is an app for that, for everything. Yes. So take us back then to the moment that you were talking about when you were riding in the car on your way to rehab with your family. What was going through your mind at that moment?
It was probably a sense of relief, although you have to say that I was just coming down off alcohol. So my last hangover, so to speak, was on the Wednesday morning. We were driving up to Auckland on a Friday morning, so it was 48 hours or thereabouts into a withdrawal. And I didn't think that I had a withdrawal, but it was a mild withdrawal because my blood pressures were through the roof, and Yeah, it was what it was. You can't drink like a fish for years and then expect to suddenly stop and everything is fine. So whilst I was not seeing pink elephants, I was probably bodily in a very strange position, in a strange state.
Okay.
My mind was full of shame, full
Mm.
of guilt,
Okay.
full of, oh my God. But at the same token, there was a resolution, there was a certain degree of gratefulness that
Okay.
I now potentially could deal with the pain. I
Mm.
couldn't on the day. I would have not been able to verbalize it like that. But with hindsight, I was glad that someone took the reins and forced me to step up and do something about the mess in my emotions, the
Mm.
pain.
I see.
And yeah, but as I said, on the day, I had no idea. It was just so strange. You've
Okay.
got all these kind of visions, and you've got things that you've seen in Hollywood films, and you think, oh
Yes.
God. So it's such an uncertainty. It's such a weird thing. And it is, it's scary. It's
Mm.
incredibly scary, the uncertainty. Yet I was actually silently embracing it.
Okay. That's very interesting that it was scary, yet you were embracing it. You used the word relieved. Um, how long had your wife contemplated having you sent to rehab before she actually did that? Do you know?
I can't answer that. I would have said uh, days to actually come up with that plan. But she had been a heavy drinker herself. But then
Oh.
she found Jesus Christ,
Mm-hmm.
and with her church community, she decided, "Now I can stop drinking." I always called it a white knuckling alcoholic, called her so.
Okay.
Because white knuckling in this circumstance means that you actually haven't dealt with the underlying reasons why you are
Mm.
drinking, but you have made the resolution, no, I do not drink. Now, in she is a fantastic woman, and she did the journey, the same journey as I did ultimately, but in a much slower pace.
I see.
So it is a rehab for those of you out there listening. A rehab is something that should be mandatory for every 16 or 18-year-old in school. You go 1 month to rehab, full stop, no excuses, because it is in rehab that I learned so much about myself, about my emotions, about what drives me, why I make the decisions that I make, why do I have a row with my wife more or less regularly, why, all these things. You
Mm.
explore the deepest inner part of yourself, and therefore you shine light into these torture chambers that are your mind. And then suddenly you realize what is happening. And then when I came home, fast forward, I was a very different man. And my
Yes.
family was quite gobsmacked after 4 weeks. The transformation that I had done, just the little things, the way I was dealing with things was so different.
Hmm.
So therefore, it is that the rehab in its own right was incredibly painful, incredibly beautiful. It was such a journey, but it was a transformation on steroids because I had all the right people to help me. I had
Okay.
a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a case manager. All the staff in there were all ex-alcoholics or ex-druggies, and it was just the most beautiful thing.
Okay.
So, in everyone there was living a life, a beautiful life, and they showed us every single day by their actions that you can live a life that is fulfilling and gorgeous,
Mm-hmm.
despite the fact that you did things that were not so nice and that you're not so proud of in the past. So
Yes.
that was that was such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful experience for me.
It's very interesting because you talk about this in your chapter about the credibility that a lot of the people at the rehab center had because they had lived an experience very similar to yours. They had been an alcoholic or an addict of some kind and experienced a similar sort of pain and guilt, shame, whatever the emotions are. And that's and you go on to describe in great detail, which is it makes for a great read, by the way, very hard hitting, about how you were resistant, especially at first, which would be absolutely natural, I would think.
Of course, of course. Hey, I'm a doctor. I know best. I'm a
Yes.
man. Of course I know everything. I'm the fixer. And as an anesthetist, that's your role. Whatever happens, you fix it. I just so happen to fix it with drugs. So whatever happens in emergency, I've got the drug for it. Now, it's a logical step, therefore, for an anesthetist also to reach for drugs or alcohol in that matter when you're coming to a problem in your own life. So that's a subconscious kind of thing that happens for us. So it is, we are weird animals. That's the only thing I can say.
I have to agree.
And
Yes.
we are so driven by our emotions. It is so bizarre, and to go into rehab to actually explore that. We had every morning at 10 o'clock. There was a session called Emotions, and it was the most dreaded rehab thing that there could be, because you
Okay.
were sitting in a room, in a big circle, and there was one moderator there. The rule was no hats, no sunglasses, nothing in your hands. You're just sitting there for an hour,
Okay.
and he would actually not say a thing. And you would think, oh. And you knew you had to talk about your emotions. If you didn't have to, but this was all about your emotions, like it or lump it.
Right.
And often enough, for many painful seconds, no one said a word. And then suddenly someone said something. And suddenly, sometimes the feathers flew because people were going against each other because someone took one Mars bar too many from the fridge, or crap like that, or people just had frictions with each other from something else, or someone just broke completely down and cried. And it was amazing the amount of emotions that suddenly came out, and people actually dealt with them. And that was what that session was all about.
Yes.
To recognize what is happening in you, to verbalize it, and then to take that as a chance to be able to deal with it. No one was offering solutions for it, but it was more like a discovery, like a treasure hunt, literally. These kind of times where you set aside an hour a day to explore what was really going on in yourself.
Okay.
And how cool is that? When was the last time that you guys out there have done that? And that's sort of where stepping out of the rat race is so important. This is one of the
Yes.
things that you learn, to seek silence and solace, to switch off your social media, to switch off everything, and
Right.
actually sit in the spa or in the sunshine, have a cup of tea in your hand, just close your eyes and see what kind of thoughts come to you, and say, oh, it's interesting. Where do you come from, you thought? And just try to let that develop. And these kind of things, I never had done that in my life prior to rehab.
Oh.
So there I was suddenly confronted with emotions that were bottled up, or that I actively hid with too much work in the daytime and too much alcohol at nighttime, so that I didn't have to to deal
Of
with
course.
these emotions.
Right.
So strange.
Oh, well, I can only imagine that in that session, it would be a strange experience. And oh my God, I had no idea that was going to come up type. Yes. And what led you to begin drinking in the first place? Do you suppose? What led you to that?
As with, I mean, I'm a child. I was born 1966.
Okay.
So when I was a teenager, it was the 80s in Germany, and in Germany there's a good going drinking culture. A lot of people say it was actually a nice drinking culture. So alcohol is part and parcel of your life, and uh, there are not too many alcoholics apparent in daily life. I now know, yes, they are there and they're hiding so well in plain sight, like we all did. I was a high functioning alcoholic. So, and again, there was every country is saturated with us. So, coming from Germany, alcohol played a role in my youth. But just, I didn't drink much in my teens.
Okay.
I was actually very focused on sport. I was focused on martial arts. I I was very focused until I went to university. And
Okay.
then suddenly I discovered the girls, and then I discovered a bar. We had a student bar in our student accommodation. And for a very cheap price, we could have some fantastic cocktails. Oh boy.
All right.
And I think that's where I saw suddenly the beauty in using alcohol to reduce my inhibitions,
I see.
to let my hair down, give me 3-4 drinks and a guitar, and hey, we're having a great time. I
Mhm.
can't sing, but that didn't matter. I was just giving it all, and my passion came out. And
Okay.
I had two friends. We were all playing the guitars together. God, we were like moths to the flame for girls. We
Sure.
had a
Oh,
very
yeah, I can
memorable
imagine.
trip to Spain where we
Ah,
just sort of
yes.
stopped the night here somewhere on the beach, played the
Beautiful.
guitar,
Beautiful.
and
All
oh
right.
God, we were never alone. It was that kind of a thing. And that
Mhm.
showed me, wow, alcohol and me, a new person comes out. And that
Okay.
new person was actually, initially, it was a very, very nice person. It was a person I enjoyed. It was a person who had a good time. There was a time when I didn't yet have hangovers from hell. And
Yes.
there was a time when I didn't have too much pain. Okay.
Okay.
Everything was still rosy colored. I knew I could take on the world. I was young, bulletproof, testosterone, all that.
Sure.
And
Mhm.
then add the alcohol in, and it was nice. But I didn't do stupid things. But I certainly became a ladies' man when the alcohol was in, and yeah, that
All
was
right.
that. So
Uh,
good times. But of
mm,
course, that doesn't stay for long, because negative things do happen. It's inevitable that there will be challenges and trauma will come along. And I had never learned to deal with these things in a healthy way. So the only thing I could do, the only thing I knew how to do, was to numb myself. And that is really what the alcohol became, a numbing
numbing
agent.
thing. Okay.
And also,
Right.
in all fairness, the other thing is when I have 3-4 drinks, I wake up. So I would have worked 16 hours straight. I'm tired as hell. And 3-4 drinks later, I will be cleaning up the garage. I will be doing whatever,
Interesting.
cooking
Okay.
20 meals or something like that. So it gave me that second wind, which was beautiful. But the problem, of course, is now I was burning the candle not just on two ends, I was burning it in the middle as well, and had a bit of a brush fire next to it. So no doubt that your body will soon rebel. So I think
Yeah.
with hindsight, what I had was not just the hangovers the next day, but my body screaming in pain to actually say, what the hell are you doing? You're abusing me. I need rest. I need good nutrition. I need not just a bit of cheese on top of your wine. I need some vitamins. I need all that.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm.
So,
Yes. Yeah, and that's a trajectory that lasted decades,
yeah.
quite literally, for you. So when you got to the point where you were in rehab, what would you describe or identify as the period where you really began to turn around? Was there a so-called bottom point where you then began to rise? What did that look like for you?
I think that point came when my case manager asked me to write a letter to a certain institution that I had held accountable and responsible
I
for
see.
much of the pain in my life. And she asked me at lunchtime one day, write this letter, write it succinct, write it in detail, etc. Write everything down in that letter to this institution.
Okay.
And I went away and I wrote absolutely everything that grieved me, everything that had happened, the bullying, the all the grief that I had experienced. And so the next day I came armed with several pieces of paper, and I was ready to explain to my case manager, see, this is why I was drinking. This is it.
Yes.
And she took that piece of paper, quickly looked at it, then folded it neatly in half and put it aside. Now she said, now that we have sort of looked at that, that's cool. Let's talk about you. And I said, but, no, let's talk about the letter. No. She said, no, you've put that now to bed. Let's talk about you.
Mhm.
And I was gobsmacked, and I was so angry with her. I was angry. Oh, I let rip next morning. You always had to in the morning, 8 o'clock, there was a quick motivational pep talk. And then there was a quick round the room. Hey, what did you learn yesterday? Tell us a bit. And I let rip. This cow, look what she did to me. And I could
Okay.
read in the eyes of the peers there, of the boss of the rehab hospital. They knew exactly what stage I was going through
Of
in
course.
my grief. And it was beautiful. And then it took me a few days to suddenly realize what has happened, and to realize then with the other work that I was doing, that I now suddenly worked at a much deeper level on my emotional limbic brain
Okay.
than actually all the regrets and the weird stuff that I was dealing with. And I was like a broken record. It was, look what they did to me. And now I show them what they did to me. Now I have 2 bottles of vodka and I tell them, ha ha. And it was
Yes.
that bullshit. It was,
Yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
God. So, but that was that. And that was, I think, the turning point. And I say that now with a smile because it so derailed me.
Okay.
I was so angry with this woman, at least for a few days. And then I saw the benefits of that exercise.
Yeah.
And she did exactly the right thing.
Okay. Well, and of course, as you just mentioned, they know exactly what they're doing at all times because
Oh.
having been through the process themselves, boom, there they are, recognition. Now,
And
you
the
were,
good thing is there's a saying, you can't bullshit a bullshitter.
yes,
So
that's right.
they have all been there. So they knew it themselves personally. They had made their journey. They were on my
Yeah.
journey, just
Yeah.
so much ahead in the path. So
Sure.
this was the beautiful thing.
They'd been through it and they'd attempted to bullshit their way out of every single thing
As we
and
do.
had been blocked every single time, as eventually happens. And so you got out then. Now, was it weird when you left rehab?
I
I mean,
wish
how was that transition back into life? on the outside. Yeah.
And that's exactly it. It's a very strange thing
Okay.
because you were in this protected bubble. Ultimately,
Mhm.
that is the first 2 weeks in rehab, you're secluded. You don't have a phone, you don't have contact with the outside world. You
Okay.
are voluntarily admitted, but
Mm.
there are rules. So basically, you are taken out of your life. So therefore, you suddenly gain the distance, you gain new insights, and you could really focus on yourself. So I now had suddenly had this beautiful 4-week holiday, which I probably wouldn't have taken this much time off anyhow, at any time in my life. But here I was, 4 weeks holiday. Plus, in those 4 weeks, I had explored depths of my consciousness and subconsciousness that I would have never imagined. So I was a very changed man when I came home.
Okay.
And of
Yeah.
course,
Mhm.
the cocky bastard in me, of course, expected the fanfare and the rose petals on the ground. Here's the changed man coming home. And in reality, no one really knew what happened to me. I
Okay.
was away, but for them, life continued. For them, their
Mhm.
daily grind continued. They had no idea. The other thing is, I can say what I want. I mean, I've said it all before. Yes, darling, I will stop drinking. Of course, I
Sure.
love you. Therefore, will I stop drinking. And 8 hours later, I would hit the bottle again. So I've lied so many times to my family that, what talk is cheap.
Right.
And that's where living amends was the thing that I could do to actually show that I'm now a different person.
Mhm.
So one of the points that were sticking points or fighting points in my family was the fact that my children never cleaned up. And
Okay.
that, I had a bee in my bonnet about the dirty kitchen. And it was weird. So often enough, that led them to rouse when I was angry with my children. And then when I came home, I started washing up. And probably my kids thought, what the heck? So I actually put my money where my mouth is, and I
Uh-huh.
actually started
Right.
doing things that just needed doing. So I suddenly became a different man, and my actions spoke for me rather than my words.
Okay.
So rehab and recovery is all about actions and decisions and mindfulness. And I walked the walk and kept my mouth shut. And that was by those actions did I gain the respect that I had craved for so hard beforehand and that I felt I had not been given.
Right. Yes, and it's a very different orientation to simply show up and then do it and live that. Like you said, it's all about action. So, at what point did you begin then this public life that you
Mm.
now have with a published book, now a chapter in a compilation, a podcast, broadcast all over the world?
Mm.
What was that transition like into then beginning to speak your
Mm.
story and experience?
I guess it started uh, 3, 4, 5 years after rehab
Okay.
when I when people slowly realized that what journey I had, and then asked me about, hey, I've got this granny who drinks far too much. Would you mind having a chat with her? Or these kind of things. And
Okay.
I slowly became more outspoken there. I started to give lectures within the
Mm.
hospital talking about addiction, what is addiction, and talked about mental health, these
I
kind of
see.
things. At that time, I sort of focused more on sobriety and on recovery and addiction issues. And that was sort of a very pleasant thing. And intriguingly, I've don't know how many lectures I gave over my lifetime. It must be in the hundreds. And these were the best attended lectures ever
Okay.
when I actually spoke about addiction. So I thought, okay, there is obviously something. And when I then looked at more closely at the figures and realized really probably 1 in 3 people here in New Zealand are chemically dependent and many of them addicted.
Sure.
The figures are huge. So therefore, when I then started speaking out a little bit more, it was nice. It was actually a good feeling to start giving back and to be there for others and to actually show that you can live a life that is very, very meaningful and very beautiful. And it was the step 12 in the AA program, really giving back.
Yeah.
Now, it sort of came naturally to me. I'm always, I mean, that's why I'm a doctor. I want to help others.
Yes.
But it was a big learning curve to carefully speak out, and you expect negative things to come back. And I cannot recall really a single time when I opened my heart and shared my story that there was any negative repercussion. On the contrary,
Right.
it was always a very positive. Wow, so nice that you got through that. Or, hey, tell me, how did you deal with that? Or, interesting. I know exactly what you're talking about. My father went through that, etc. So I gained a much higher standing in many people's eyes than I had before. So therefore, it was actually opening up became a very positive thing. It's still embarrassing. There are still emotions. Even nowadays, there's the little voice sitting on my shoulder here, the little devil says, oh, you get these negative emotions coming through that you want to shy away from. You don't want to speak out. You don't want to do that. Oh my God, someone will take offense to what you're saying, or etc., etc. So there's always this temptation that it would be easier and more comfortable if you just keep your mouth shut. The reality is, with that, you do not change your own life, and you do not get the chance to change other people's lives. I think I've gone through so much shit in my life. I've gone through so much trauma that I want to make it meaningful. And now, over the last year, I have found my voice. I have found the courage to get up and shout it from the rooftops, and I'm not shouting, look, that was great times when I was lying in the gutter and couldn't remember a thing. You're not talking about the negative things. You're talking, yes, I've been in the gutter, but look how I got up and dusted myself off. And it's that journey, it's that transformation that I want to show others.
Yes.
And these are the people that I bring onto my show, A Different Life Story. These are all transformations that where people speak up about those things that were very hard for them and teach us the lessons, how they went about to deal with the trauma. And it's so beautiful. In this journey, every day I meet new people. And in all fairness, I have sometimes felt far closer connected to my guests on my show than I have to many of people that I met and worked with, for example, for many years. It's just because we're talking such deep, honest stuff. It's like a brotherhood of people who have gone through pain and are now sharing their story. It's a very powerful brother and sisterhood.
Yes, it really is. And I can attest to that, having listened to a number of your shows and having been your guest. It is very, very powerful. And again, for listeners, that's A Different Life Story with Stephan Neff. Now, that's a rebranding, A Different Life Story. You had a different title before. Let's talk about the rebranding of this.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, simple. My Steps to Sobriety. That was initially the name of my book, and it made sense that my podcast, my YouTube channel, and all my social media should be the same.
Yeah.
So, and it made sense for about a fortnight or a month.
Okay.
And then very quickly, did I realize when I approached people, well, first of all, when you start a podcast, how do you find your guests? Well, you go onto discussion forums on the internet. There are great places out there where people hang out and put themselves out there. Hey, this is me. This is my story. This is my strength. Would you like me to be a guest on your show? So on these kind of places, I found fantastic people. So I got in touch with them. But initially, actually, I had a few people say, look, sobriety is not really my thing. Alcohol was not really an issue. Addiction is not my story. My story is PTSD. My story is anxiety. My story is that I focus on LGBT or on teens. And I thought, okay, yeah, well, that's what I want to talk about. That's because I want to talk about the reasons why people drink, the reasons why people do stupid things. So I want to explore the trauma ultimately in there. So that was my intention. And I found that the title of my show was getting in the way to that. Or I found myself apologetic when I approached people, said, don't get hung up on the title of my story. What I really want to talk about is, and therefore a different life story is far more fitting as a name with regards to the transformations that I explore. Now, many of my guests have had addiction as part of their trauma, as part of their journey, but it's for sure not defining them. And many of my guests nowadays are, I invite them specifically for the trauma that they have gone through and how they are now healed, or how they are still healing, how they have transformed, because these are the lessons from which we can learn. And then once you focus on that, the alcohol seems to just drop away. It is, I don't get any more urges. I don't get any more cravings. It was, I mean, this weekend I went away for a shooting competition, and with my son, and we basically were out on a paddock in a field the whole day in the sun, and it was most beautiful. It was good workout, and we were overheated, sweaty, and of course afterwards, as men do, it was typically mainly men there, you open a beer and you talk shit, and it's just it's beautiful. So this was one of the few times when I looked back and I saw the condensation on the beer bottles running down. I thought, okay, I could do with a beer. But it was more the bonding. It was more the being together as men, sharing a hobby and a competition in this case. And it was amazing. But I looked at that in a positive way. This was not the craving, I need that beer. So it was interesting. So that was the only time now for many, many months that I had thoughts of alcohol.
Oh, okay.
That is what I'm saying to you guys out there. If you listen to that because you're still in your own addiction, if that still plays an important role, it is only now. And if you put the actions in, if you put the mindfulness in, if you put all that in and do every day the right steps, the right decisions, very soon your life changes in such a way that suddenly you forget that alcohol is out there, or that the pee is out there, or the cannabis, or the sex, or the eating, or the gambling, whatever your addiction is. It is, as I said, the past does not equal the future, but you can't just switch it off with a light switch. You need to do the work, and that's the key message I want to send out there, guys. You can do it, guys. If I'm a Muppet, for crying out loud, if I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, that's a very powerful message, and I know that there are people out there listening that need to hear that right there. So thank you for sharing that and everything that you've shared here on the show today. If people want to find out more information about you, or to chat with you, perhaps to be a guest on your show, how would people reach out to you and get a hold of you?
Hmm. Thank you very much for pointing towards the rebranding, because I'm
Of
literally,
course.
it's the in January here I made a call to give it a new name. So
Mhm.
some of the stuff on the internet is still labeled My Steps to Sobriety.
Yes.
But if you were to give that in as hey, I want to be on My Steps to Sobriety, unfortunately you will not find much. So A Different Life Story is the handle that you want to look out for. And please look at the YouTube channel, A Different Life Story. The podcast is out there on all the platforms that you can imagine. If you want to get in touch with me, you can do that via LinkedIn. You can do that as a messenger to Stephan Neff. So I'm very happy to be approached. I'm very happy to share some insights there, but I'm not a life coach.
Okay.
I am not a counselor. I I was a pain physician in the past, and as a
Right.
pain physician, I was dealing with a lot of suffering, a lot of chronic pain, and I must say that there was a lot of transference, that I took on a lot of the pain of my clients, of my patients, and ultimately it ate me up. It destroyed me. I let it destroy me.
Okay.
I didn't have the support, so therefore I make now the point of not giving coaching sessions or anything like
Okay.
that. But
Yes.
what I do is give you an honest talk, an honest, hey, look, this is what happened to me. So I'm very open with my story and let you learn the lessons from that. And the lessons are in my book, My Steps to Sobriety.
Okay.
So it is a lovely book, may I say. Well, you should never blow your own trumpet, for crying out loud. But
Well, I think that you
the,
should.
the,
Why not?
the first half is really about my journey and the 12 steps in the AA program. But I've translated
Yeah.
it into a modern language, and it hopefully gives meaning without people getting hung up on the words God or other kind of stumble
Sure.
stones that
Sure.
traditionally were in the way. But the
Okay.
second half of the book is all about you dealing with the challenges in your life, because there are so many challenges, from financial trouble to relationship trouble to toxic people in your workplace to depression, anxiety. Well, I'm talking about all of them, and in this book, and you get sort of an introduction and then an action plan. What
Okay.
I would
Yeah.
do if I
Oh,
had a toxic person
oh,
at
beautiful. Okay.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would I do? How do I recognize an anxiety attack? How do I recognize a depression? And
Mhm.
what would you do about it? So we're talking some very honest and frank topics in there.
I love that. Okay.
And it is a book that hopefully helps a lot of people out there.
hmm Yes. And I love that there's a practical component. There's
Mm,
situations in there. What would you do with a toxic person? And
mm,
again, the title is My Steps to Sobriety. Yes.
mm,
And I really invite the listeners to check that out and to check out the podcast, give that a listen, A Different Life
mm,
Story. It is, having been a guest, a very powerful show. And I very much appreciate your willingness to hold that space for people to go deep and to have what can only be considered a cathartic experience talking about it as you experienced, as I experienced writing this chapter. And again, the book that we're referring to here, Breakdown to Wake Up, which is available anywhere that you buy books, ebook and paperback worldwide. And you can find Stephan's chapter in Breakdown to Wake Up. Great read, and I highly, highly recommend it. So, Stephan, this has been a really wonderful experience, and it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show here today.
mm.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to add?
For your listeners, it is so important to realize that whatever happened up to this point in your life is in the past. You cannot do anything about it. So therefore, it is time to move forward. I don't say forget the past. You have got a duty to learn from it.
Yes.
And that is with regards to your own actions, as well as historically with regards to the actions of my forefather, being German, Nazis, the Holocaust, all these kind of things. That is an example where I have got a duty to learn from the past. I also see that as a man, you have a duty to learn the lessons and then to hand them on. And you can do that right now, by you actually listening here. You have already made a choice. You have already taken action. And that is incredibly powerful. You made the first step. You know, how do you walk 10,000 miles? Well, you put your right foot forward, and congratulations, you have already done that. You have started your journey without actually knowing. So therefore, now at the moment you stop listening, you can make the next choice. For example, we all are dehydrated like crisps. Why not have a big glass of water? Just for shits and giggles. That's your next choice. Why not then say, oh, I could have a quadruple cheese pizza, or I could have that yummy chicken breast with shitloads of broccoli and yummy things with a good sauce. There is another choice. And so on, and so on. Make those choices. You are in control. No one is pushing you. Yes, well, wrong. People are pushing you. Situations are pushing you, but you have got choices. Take them, make them consciously, and make your world a little bit better, one action at a time. And you have no idea where you end up. This path that is waiting for you guys is so beautiful. So gorgeous. You can't see it yet, I assure you, because you have no idea what the future brings. But I give an inkling. I give you the idea. Listen to my voice. Listen to that passion. This is not something that I'm making up. This is an energy ball that wants to explode out of my chest. And I invite you to come onto this path and experience that, because it will happen to you if you keep making the right choices in your life. So come on this path. Don't give up. Don't resign yourself to the misery and mess that maybe your life is right now. No. Take the action, take the steps, learn from others, find your tribe that gives you the success chances that you deserve. Find a power team. In other words, be the stupidest person in your team. So if you struggle with regards to, I don't know, in your job, if you want, let's say you make a restaurant, you want to be a restaurateur, you have no idea about a restaurant. Well, what would you do? You would get a maître from the front of the house who has done that a bit before. You have a chef who knows what he's doing, an accountant who knows what he's doing. Find the people. And now in your life, do the same thing. If you are full of trauma, talk to a counselor, talk to a psychologist. Find the people that can help you to address the grief that is left there, address the abuse that you might have suffered in your childhood, address all those things. And these are all actions with which you can suddenly deal with things and move on. Move on towards a better life, the life that you've deserved.
Yes, everyone has deserved, and it's waiting for you. And like you put it, it's beautiful, and it's a choice that we make, a decision, moment by moment. So, Stephan, thank you so much for taking the time to join me here on the show today. This has been wonderful. And listeners, I invite you to check out the podcast, A Different Life Story. Very, very powerful. And if you are out there listening, if you know of people that would benefit from listening to Stephan's show, please send them the link, encourage them to download the show, encourage them to visit YouTube, A Different Life Story, and get the in-depth, raw sharing from people all over the world. It's a very powerful platform, and I'm so happy that you're taking the time out of your life and your energy to help people with this and to encourage them to take that next step. So thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a pleasure.
The pleasure is all on my side, and it was an honor to work with you as a co-author on Breakdown to Wake Up, as well as now I have this beautiful relationship with you that we can collaborate and can make this world a little bit of a better place, one interview at a time.
Yes,
It is the world needs it right now, so
very much.
I'm honored to have been on your show. Thank you
Oh,
so
very
much.
much. Yeah, this has been a pleasure, and I look forward to future collaborations and doing this again. It is a lot of fun. All right, this has been Dr. Stephan Neff here on Decide to Transform. Thank you for tuning in. Have a beautiful rest of your day.